Good morning, dear friends. Welcome. Today is Tuesday, August 23rd, Chaf Vav of the 26th of, and we're studying the entire Talmud, one page, one line at a time. Presently, Masechet Shabbat, chapter 19, Perek Eliezer Demila, and we are on 130b, Kuf Lamed Amud Beis, which means we're making our initial descent to the Siyum of Masechet Shabbat. We have another approximately almost 30 blot left, 27 blot or so left. So we'll spend some time here with Masechet Shabbos before we're through, but just so we can celebrate and appreciate the great progress we are making. We're dedicating learning this week to the Nishmas, our dear Dr. Pasternak's father's yahrzeit, which was last week. But last week we were not in session, and so we're honoring Shmuel ben Yisrael Moshe Halevi, and prayerful wishes for good news and health for all of the dear members of our Kabura. Today, we've deviated a little bit from the common conversation. Well, I'll back up. The Mishnah is talking about circumcision, a bris, Bismillah, important mitzvah, how it works on Shabbos. Well, as we know, there are different opinions about precisely how much malacha can be done on Shabbos for the purpose of doing a bris. For sure, the actual act of the milah can be done on Shabbos, but how about the preparation, carrying, securing, procuring the items needed for the bris? Well, there is a discussion about that, and there is a distinction that was made yesterday between carrying in a public domain and through biblically private domains, but yet complex. And so we talked about carrying it through chatzeros and batim and gagos, and that led us to a discussion about other domains that we haven't yet had a chance to talk a lot about, and they will be discussed primarily in the next Masech, the Maseches Eruvin, which was a question of how do we turn a chatzer, a courtyard, how do we imbue a courtyard with the status of an Eruv, that it can be carried as a single domain? How do we imbue a mavoi with the status to be able to carry throughout the mavoi? And so we said that there are steps to be made. There are things that can be done. When it comes to a mavoi, we called it shituf. When it comes to a courtyard, we call it an eruv, but it's the same idea that we are taking and turning a area that is not a singularly owned rishus hayachid, and we're turning it into a private domain. We're imbuing it with the status as if it is a bayis, as if it is an individual domain, because all of the members are essentially turning it into a common element, a common jointly held space. We ended off yesterday, and we're going to start today with a little bit of a sub discussion, which was the question about if you have houses and a chutzner. So now I was looking for a picture of it. Actually, hold on one second. Give me one second. Let me see if I can find the picture to show. Because basically our Gemara is discussing three different kinds of, three components of the housing arrangement in Mishnaic and Talmudic times. You had an individual home, which was a group of a series of homes that open into a common backyard, or what we're called a courtyard, a chatzer, where all the homes open into it. And then that chatzer opens into a common space that we're calling a mavoi, an alleyway of sorts, which then leads to a public domain, to a rishus harabim, to a larger space. So, you all at Barrel's telepathic request. All right. And so you have the homes opening to a courtyard, which opens into a mavoi, which opens into a public domain. And so the sub question is, if you make the chatzer into a roof, you're essentially giving the chatzer, in a sense, the status of a rishus hayachid, like a single home. Well, then how does that affect the mavai that it is attached to? And according to Rav, it affects it in a surprising way. It would actually restrict the ease of your use. I'm sorry, it would restrict the ability for you to carry in the mavai. Sounds confusing. Let's go through it fast, and then we'll move on to the next section of the Gemara. But let's get started in a moment. Hold on, I gotta just find the Gemara. Here, 1 second. Let's share the screen. Let's get started, and hopefully,
Rabbi, I mean,
yes.
if they didn't designate the Chazer is within the area, it would be restricted anyway. So that way,
hold on. Let me clarify. There's two parts. When we use the word Eruv, there are two components. There is the structure of the Eruv, and then there is the fact that there was what we call the Eruv Chatzeros, which is the matzah or whatever that, and the designation that it represents everyone. To us, in our minds, the primary part of an Eruv is the structure, because that's usually the harder part to facilitate. But here, we're going back a little bit to the genesis, to the origin of the idea of that Eruv, and we're talking about an area that may be technically enclosed, but has there been an act of uniting all of the dayarim, all of the residents, through a commonly held food or something that unites them commonly and allows this place to halakhically be considered a common space. So right now, for the purposes of this discussion, the Chatzar is enclosed fully. As we'll see in the Gemara, the Mavai may or may not be enclosed to the same extent. But that's not really the question at hand. The question at hand is, if you change, we're getting ahead of ourselves. If you turn a Chatzar into a house, well, how does that mess with the desert? How does that mess with the status of a Mavai? Let's go through it fast. We'll give another recap, and I think it'll make more sense. It's the kind of thing that my introductory comments are not necessarily helpful. Let's see. Itmar Amar Rab Zeir Amar Rav. So we're coming from a conversation of Rav weighing in on different elements of a Mavoi, Chatzar, Eruv carrying conversation. So now we're going to quote another statement. We're going to explain it, and then we're going to troubleshoot it. Mavoi Shaloi Nishtatvu Boi. A Mavoi, again, this is the outer alleyway, which has a bunch of courtyards opening into it. Shaloi Nishtatvu Boi, that they did not create an Eruv. They didn't do the technical halachic part of fusing together all the other spaces. Ein metaltal boi ela ba'arba amas. You can only carry in it 4 amas, which is the same halachic treatment as a public domain. So again, a mavoi that didn't have an Eruv done, didn't have I'm trying to find a good analogy. You have the structure, but then what's really the Eruv we're talking about here is whatever the technical process of fusing all the different shareholders together, creating a condo, I guess. Right? Actually, that's an interesting question. A condominium is a legally uniting legal body, right? That every owner of the condo essentially is represented in the condominium. Now, unfortunately, our interests aren't always represented in that condo structure, but in a legal sense, every owner is a member or shareholder to some extent. I'm not trying to get into our current condo woes. I'm just trying to think if it's a good analogy. Dr. Ham is shaking his head. You're saying I'm confused. You're muted. Doctor?
That's not necessarily true, because
okay.
if you have 3 buildings, okay, there are certain things even right now that don't apply the same to each of the buildings.
I hear you.
Certain things have to be voted on, and certain insurances don't apply to the common area, which is another entity with a different responsibility for. Yeah. Okay.
All right. So
why don't the Rabbanim designate the Mavoi as part of the Chatzir? I mean,
it's a real process that needs to actually be done. The Chachamim can't designate it. The homeowners need to designate.
No, but it's an entryway. You can't have an entryway into, you can't have a chutzner without an entryway into the chutzner.
No. So the mavoi has a certain degree of enclosure and has shareholders in the mavoi, but we need to do something that unites them. At this time, they without
I'm
making the
picturing
error.
Maybe I'm not picturing it correctly. The way I'm picturing it is let's say a three housing on three sides with apartments and entering into the chutzner, all opening up into the chutzner.
Okay.
Now, from the chutzner into the outside, it could be even on the fourth side, but into the street, there has to be like a gateway. It could have some length into for the width of the housing, but it has to be an entryway into the
Right.
chutzner. So wouldn't that actually be part of the chutzner?
So again, you're asking. It's my lack of clarity. I'm not clarifying enough. We are not talking about the technical structure. We're not talking about the structural integrity or design of the chutzner or the mavoi. We are talking about a conceptual process called eruv, where every member brings a piece of food and they put it into a common space, symbolically fusing their interests into a single entity.
Right.
We're talking about
I
something
understand that.
conceptual.
I understand it. But why are they separating the mavoi from the chutzner?
Because the mavoi is a totally separate, it has a totally separate function. The mavoi is the chutzner. The mavoi is a chutzner's chutzner. The courtyards facilitate a number of homes.
They're designated as an entryway rather than as part of
Nothing to do with designation, where its technical design and relationship to courtyards warrants different halachic treatment. Let me look one more time for a picture, and then we'll, if not, we'll go through this fast, because really this is really a tangent from the primary conversation here. But hold on, let me see.
Well, I can picture a castle, and you have and you go into the castle through the entryway or into the chutzner.
Hold on, let me see if I can get a picture to share. Google's not. Well, actually, let's do this together. Why should I do it here? Illustration of. See, most of these pictures are not in Shabbos; they're in Eruvin. Let's see if we find some. Google, you don't. Chutzner and mavoi. Let's just add the word Shabbat so we know it's Jewish. Image.
Chutzner mavoi.
Where are you? See something? Oh, here.
Go back to where you just.
Yeah. See, this is an illustration for.
Yeah.
Actually, hold on. Let's do one more thing. We'll go to all daf. The problem is it's not going to come up in our Gemara. It comes up in. Let's see if they allow pictures. No pictures. Give me one more second.
Rabbi.
Yes, Rebero.
Don't we have a historical problem? The way the houses were in Talmudic time versus in the times of Rashi, let's say. So a lot of this is, to me, very difficult to pin down.
No, it's pretty clear. Here. Oh, here.
I have a picture.
Hold on. You see the screen?
All right.
There you go. Okay.
Again, I might have designed it a little differently, but it accommodates the same thing. You have over here 2 chutzers and 1 mavoi. I think in real life you could have 3 or 4 chutzers and 1 mavoi.
So it's actually an alleyway.
That's what it's an alleyway. It's exactly what a chutzner. Hold on, excuse me 1 second.
It could be the entrance.
Notice it has that portal.
I thought it was an entryway.
It's got the thing across the top that makes it
To me,
Yeah,
it looks
just a
like the
regular
entrance, not like an alleyway.
Yeah,
No, the mavo is in the middle, in between the two.
Yeah, but to get to the house,
Where is the street?
it's in the street in front of the bricks in the front, going,
Right,
Right.
so that's the entrance.
Yeah.
That would
And
be
so
like
the
the
entrance
gate
got
to the
that,
condos.
by having that lintel across the top makes it more of a,
Folks, give me 1 second. I'm sorry. I just got to take care of something real that just came up.
I think the hut says the
Yeah, I'm
backyard.
gonna post
Backyard.
something to the group on WhatsApp. It's a picture also.
Are we claiming that this is how things were at Talmudic times?
I think something like that you can see today, you can find today too.
Bernie, I think this was built by a Lego engineer.
It might be that it was in Talmudic time.
Folks, pardon me
because-
just 1 second. I need to just run. I'll be 5 minutes. If you don't mind, you'll indulge me. Stay on the chat.
It's okay, we're doing
Do this
construction
important
here.
Talmudic
Don't worry.
the exploration. Give me a little time. Please don't go anywhere. I'm just going to step away for a moment.
FaceTime is fine.
The street here is in the front of the picture where it says.
Right, it says Rishus Harabim.
Yeah, but the important thing that separates this
Wait,
structure from any other is what is number 3. That makes it and also 2 ends that makes it symbolic entrance that actually separates the whole structure and combines those 2 lines of houses. Without this, as we will have here 2 Hatzarim. But this is the symbolic junction that combines it into a new structure. I doubt that they had that later than Talmudic times. Although I don't know why I think so.
Hold on one
Are we to presume that gate is attached, or it could be in front of the building?
No, there is no actually building. There are several buildings here. And those things, I don't think that they have to be attached to the foundation, but it is like a common sense. If they're not attached to anything, they might be just dug in without attaching. Oh, I don't remember that attaching was of any importance, which doesn't mean that it is not important. But what is important is this structure with beam number 3, and sometimes I think they reach this effect, but only 2 vertical beams without the beam number 3. All that is symbolically separates this structure from the street and makes it a united structure.
I'm sorry, but you keep on saying number 3. I don't see where do you see the
It's
number?
not number 3. It's number B. It's letter B. Sorry.
A bed. You mean the bed?
Yes.
The
the
But I don't
house-
see the purpose of that. Why is it there altogether? It doesn't seem to be a gate. Why do you
No,
need that altogether?
It's symbolic, like an arrow that makes it a community. Those 2 lines of houses now represent a unity, not 2 separate lines of houses.
But you have
From
something in the back
Okay.
also, which would serve that
Yes.
purpose.
And I think that in Eruvim, they have picture where this structure is on the back also, or instead.
I
But
sent into the WhatsApp.
Just
I
to
sent into
unite.
the WhatsApp a picture, also similar to this,
it's similar, yeah.
but in that picture, there's no horizontal beam
But there-
over the 2.
There's a gate. though.
There's
half a
Yeah,
gate.
there's a
But
gate.
the beam bed is sufficient to make this unification.
But the houses seem to be way above the ground level, unless it's just a bad drawing. It's like the
Yeah,
first
but
floor of a motel.
That's probably not a characteristic feature. They hardly
That
were
looks like it.
afraid of flood or something. No, I don't know why it is on this foundation. But from the picture, it's clear that the street is in the front of the picture.
Yes, it says Reshut HaRabin.
Mhm.
They both.
Bernie, tell them at La Mer how hard it is to get all the owners to bring a piece of food. What would happen if you have some owners who say, I don't want an Eruv?
I think that turns out that can be a problem.
Human nature being what it is?
Majority rules, Bernie.
I don't know if that's enough for an Eruv. They said every single owner. Majority rules if the election is fair.
I keep on hearing stories about fake elections and all that. How does that come about? I mean, they even have state monitors coming in and checking, and still there are people complaining. I know Parker Plaza.
Menachem, does the name Daly in Chicago ring a bell?
Yeah, but those were the Tammany Hall. That was the old days.
Yeah,
I
so it's the
mean,
same thing in a modern version.
yeah, but if they have state monitors and this and lawyers and everything, here we have the same issue here in Parker Plaza. This is cheating. This is lying. And I'm saying to myself, why? I mean, I don't know. It's a total mess.
Look at the total percentage of voters. The people who don't vote could elect the president. You know, in Australia, they fine you if you don't vote.
Really.
Yeah. Might come to that.
In Israel, they pay you to vote.
From all parties. All
Each party
parties.
pays you. Yeah, each party pays you a couple of bucks.
The other
And
thing
they'll take you out to dinner afterwards.
my cousin told me when I said, why so many elections? He said, don't forget, we get the whole day off here when we have an election.
Here it seems like the elections always come out just the day of leaving, or the day before I come back. They must.
Yeah, because
must
they know
know.
they're gonna tilt, your
30.
vote is gonna tilt it one way or the other.
Yeah, right. Yeah, like one vote. Yeah. I mean, we're supposed to be the 25th, but we had already scheduled away event, but they're doing it. We leave on the 31st. Is their election's the first.
Folks, have we figured it out? All righty.
Well, we see the similarities between the two pictures, except for the one that you have up here has that lintel across. Well, the other one just instead of that has
All
a
right,
gate.
so I'm going to
that
ask.
must
Here, let's go back. I'm assuming you guys probably figured it out, but we need to forget. We're getting bogged down too much at this point by the technicality of the structure, and less aware of cognizant of the conceptual distinction and the technical distinction between a chatzer and a alleyway. Now, the reason why we're doing that is because here they do actually a great job in properly showing the mavai as a dead end alley, which is really, for many purposes, many times what a mavai is. But conceptually, the chaser is where the homes open into, as you see over here. There's two homes. I think most chasers had more than two homes, but they're just giving us this is a Mishnah, an illustration, not for Argamar. This is an illustration for Eruvin. But what we see here is you have the courtyard, which is a common space that serves homes. Then you have a mavai, which is a common space or a pass-through for multiple chatzers. Now, indeed, one of the necessary aspects of making a mavai enclosed would be possibly to create a tzura sapesach, some kind of way to delineate a fourth wall enclosed with a lintel and two posts, which is again the subject of Erev. For the purposes of our discussion, the Gemara is curious to know whether, or the Gemara is asserting in the name of Rav, that if this area is conceptually united with an Erev, again, we're not talking structure as much as if they go through the process of conceptually fusing together the different homeowners into a single entity of a Chatzer, how does that affect the alleyway, if at all? That's a whole discussion. It's a tangent, it's a side matter, which again, in just a moment, we're going to step past. But that's the issue as we should consider it. And indeed, here is another. No. I'm going to ask you to ignore this picture for now. Let's see if there's anything else really fast that would be helpful. No, we'll stick with this as our illustration for now. Now, my dear friends, let's jump into the Gemara. We'll do it fast, and we'll move on to the next subject, which will also ask us to use our brain cells, but hopefully it'll be a different style that'll be a little more familiar. So here we go. Itmar Rav Zera Rav Zera conveyed a teaching of Rav, which was Mavai Shalai Nishtatu Bai. If the Mavai did not have an Eruv in it, the alleyway, Ein Metaltalin Bai Elabar Ba'ames, then you can only carry 4 ames worth in the Mavai. The Mavai is essentially being treated as a public domain. A public domain, you can carry less than 4 ames. And now we're saying that a Mavai without an Eruv is the same. That's the statement. But don't get caught up on this statement. Amar Abaya. Abaya then said, what exactly was Rav talking about remained a mystery until the arrival of Rabbi Baravua, who can convey to us the context. Here is what it was. If you have a mavai, an alleyway, where the residents did not do the halachic steps necessary to make that mavai to have an eruv. Now, so you have a mavai without an eruv. I'm not talking again about structure here. I'm talking about the conceptual act of fusing it together. Or not conceptual, the halachic act of fusing it together. If the courtyards that open into the alleyway have an eruv, a metaltalin boy elabar ba'amis, now the alleyway is like a public domain. Loy eruv chatzeiros batim. If an eruv was not created in the chatzers, and now the homeowners cannot carry from their homes into the chatzer, as Rashi says, in that case, one would be permitted to carry throughout the alleyway. A shocking statement that really doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. The absence of an eruv in the chatzer would make the mavai more available to carry in without an eruv. But if the chatzer had an eruv, then you cannot carry in the mavai. It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. Again, if these chatzers have an eruv, well, then the mavai now is entirely treated like a public domain. But if these chatzers do not have an eruv and the homeowners of the homes cannot carry from the homes into the courtyard, and well, now the mavai can be carried. What's the sense in that? if I may say so myself, it doesn't initially seem to make a lot of sense. And indeed, let's see. Rav Chanina asked Rabba, Maishna, why are we making a distinction between if there is an Eruv in the courtyard and not Maishna ki Eruv batim and batim, Maishna ki Eruv chatzeris and batim? Why, when we create a situation where you're allowed to carry from the homes to the courtyards, that you can not carry in the Mavai? So he explains, the nitku chatzeros v'nasu batim. When you make an Eruv in the Chatzer, technically, halachically, what happens is the Chatzer loses its status as a Chatzer. It's now really conceptually a house. It's conceptually an individually owned Rishus HaYachid. Rav L'tamei, and Rav, who again, all of this is only the opinion of Rav. This follows Rav's reasoning. Damarav, ein hamavai nitar v'lechi v'kaira. Rav says, even if your mavai has a lechi and a kaira, even if it has this proper suras pesach doorway that should enclose a mavai, ein hamavai nitar ad sheyihiyu batim v'chatzeros psuchim l'toichai. There has to be homes and courtyards flowing into the alleyway. But if the Chatzer has an Eruv, it's not a Chatzer, and so now the Mavai is lacking the technical criteria to be allowed to carry it. Again, we're getting into a sub opinion on a matter of Eruvin, but because Rav says a kosher Mavai that's considered enclosed enough to carry it, because it is not a public domain, needs to have homes flowing into it via courtyards. But the Chatzer undesignates. It turns the Eruv turns a Chatzer into a halachically considered a home. Now your Mavai does not have the criteria to be allowed to carry in, and therefore, based on this technicality, Rav says you will not be allowed to carry in a Mavai if the Chatzer has an Eruv in it. By making an Eruv, it's as if there is no Chatzer. The Chatzer has the halachic status of a home. That is the explanation in short of Rav. It's a technicality. I don't want to delve too deeply into the reason behind it, just because I want to get on to our next discussion, the Gemara, but let's take it as fact. So the Gemara asks, I don't understand. Hiloi ervu nami, even absent in Eruv, lechazino lahani batim, keman distimi damu. Let's read Rosh Steinsaltz for it. Let's consider the homes as if they were closed off, because you cannot carry from the home to the Mavai, because you cannot carry in the Chatzer. And so the homes are like off. It's like they're locked off. Now, you have a courtyard that leads into the Mavai, but no home leading into the Mavai, because the homes are off limits, because the courtyard doesn't have an Eruv, and so you cannot carry into it. And so, according to Rav, you should never be allowed to carry in a Mavai, an alleyway, because an alleyway never has proper seamless access both to homes and to courtyards. Either the alleyway is attached to a Chatzer, which has the status of a home, or the alleyway leads into a Chatzer, but you cannot carry from a home via the Chatzer into the alleyway. That is the question the Gemara asks. The Gemara answers, Efshar, maybe we could engineer it so that it is considered a house leading into a courtyard, leading into the Mavai, if all the people make their homes as if it's one entity. Let's keep on moving here. Bottom line. Then there's only one home, not multiple homes, further creating a problem where, according to Rav, you should never be allowed to carry in a Mavai. The Gemara is going to give another somewhat out there technical proposal. Maybe they'll make it so that it's as if all the homes belong to one person in the morning, one person in the afternoon. Therefore, there are two different ownerships related to the carrying in the chaser. The Gemara says, there's never two homes. There's one home that has two different owners. That doesn't satisfy the criteria needed by Rav. Who causes the chaser to be prohibited? Batim veleka. Yeah, let's read Rabbi Steinsaltz here. Had there been no houses, you'd be allowed to carry in the chatzar. So being that here, it's as if there are no houses because there was no Eruv, therefore you can still carry. So again, according to Rav, if the chatzar has an Eruv, you cannot carry in the mavoi, but if there is no Eruv in the chatzar, although the homes are blocked off, it's not a problem. You will be able to carry going in deeper into the reasoning of Rav. This concludes our little taste of the conversation of Eruvin. If you're feeling confused or a little bit overwhelmed, that's all right. We can, if we should so desire, put it out of our minds. Suffice it to say, just to recap, Rav has an interesting take on what makes a mavai allowed to be carried in. A mavai needs to be related to homes and a chatzar. If the chatzar is not halachically considered a chatzar because it's considered a home, he would say you cannot carry in the mavai. There'll be opportunity to probe this further. And also, once we go through Eruvin, if we'll do it next Masechta, we'll choose another Masechta first. We'll have the building blocks in a more systematic way, and so it'll be less confusing. It'll make more sense. So, my dear friends, have no fear. Oh, I should say, I ran away for a few minutes. Thank you for indulging and sticking on. Thank you. So now we'll go on to a new segment of the Gemara. My car's battery died, and my wife had the kids in the car, so I had to run and bring her the car. So that's why I ran away. But
Rabbi, I have AAA if you need.
Well, AAA would help. The kids had to go to before they go back to school, they had to go to a doctor's appointment. AAA wouldn't give them a ride there. So, but anyways, I want to thank you for your indulgence and your patience. Here we go. Amar Rav Chia bar Abba, Amar Rabbi Yechon. And Yosef's going to get us a new battery, so it's going to be good. Hashem's help. Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Amar Rabbi Yechon. Another halachic conversation. Now our conversation is going to go all the way back to our original discussion. The discussion was, can you be mechalel Shabbos for machshirei mitzvah, for the items that facilitate a mitzvah? What does that mean? Well, we know there is the essential act of the mitzvah, for example, a bris that can be done on Shabbos. But then there are the things that lead to being able to have a bris, like the knife of the milah and other things. So we have a solution. We should have insurance. It should be in. Okay. So you shouldn't have to go there. You should have to call them, right? Yeah. Ask them. All right, sir. So the question is, when and is it always okay to be mechalel Shabbos for machshir mitzvah? Now, as you may recall, some opinions say never. That's like the predominant opinion in our Mishnah, which says that you're not allowed to be mechalel Shabbos to make a knife or to carry a knife. You can only be mechalel Shabbos to make the cut. That's the essential mitzvah. But now we're going to probe the perspective of Rabbi Eliezer. Does Rabbi Eliezer say you can always do anything that leads to a mitzvah, or does he also have a certain cutoff where certain things are not allowed? And does it apply to all mitzvahs or only some? So let's see it inside. It'll make this Gemara will feel a whole lot more. This is practically vacation from the previous Gemara. Am Rabbi Chia bar Abba Am Rabbi Yechon. Loi la kol Am Rabbi Eliezer machshirei mitzvah doichin es Shabbos. Not in every circumstance or in every mitzvah is Rabbi Eliezer going to permit machshirei mitzvah, the facilitation of a mitzvah, to be doichet, to push off Shabbos. Let's read Rashi. Loi bekol machshirei mitzvah amar kain. He didn't say this as a blanket statement about all things that allow mitzvah to happen. L'kamon mefarish hai machshirei mitzvah aslan mutin. The Gemara is going to go on a journey to try to figure out which mitzvah or which machshirei mitzvah, which facilitation of a mitzvah did Rabbi Eliezer not include in his license to do a mitzvah to do machshir mitzvah. Where do we see this? Sharei shtei halechem choivas hayoim hein Rashi. We know that on Shavuos there is a carbon called shtei halechem. Rashi, the atzeres, a carbon done on Shavuos, choivas yoim hein. It needs to be done on Shabbos. Ve'ein la'achron ad lemachar, and it may not be delayed until after Shabbos. And yet, again, hold on. If you want to see the source, the biblical, here hang on. So, hope no one's having traumatic flashbacks from the screen. Hold on. Safaria, Tanakh, Vayikra, Chaf, Gimel, Pasuk Yud Zayin. This is in Emor. Count 7 days from the second day of Pesach. Sheva Shabbos complete weeks 7 until the conclusion of 7 weeks, which is as for 50 days. Shavuos v'krafta mincha chadash l'Hashem, and then you bring a carbon, an offering of new grain. 2 loaves of bread. Shnei esronim soiles, made of 2 esronim, 2/10 of fine flour. Tihiyena chametz, tiafena should be chametz. Bikurim laHashem, and this will be part of the Shavuos, first of the new Yil Tash. This is called in Mishnaic language the mitzvah of Shtei HaLechem. They link to it more direct. Okay, so you have a mitzvah of Shtei HaLechem, which is an absolute mitzvah to be done on Shavuos. Therefore, if Shavuos and Shabbos coincide, you should be allowed to do it. Rabbi Eliezer proves that you may bake the Shtei HaLechem, this carbon on Shabbos, only from a special tool for analyzing the Torah called the Gzeira Shava. Let's read Rashi. Rabbi Eliezer, the Afiyasam Titcha Shabbos, that you should be allowed to bake these breads if Shavuos and Shabbos coincide. Ella b'Gzeira Shava. He needed to employ a tool for biblical exegesis called the Gzeira Shava, which is, as we'll see in a moment, when a common word is used in 2 instances, if all criteria are met, we will transfer halachic facts from one citation to the other, from one mitzvah context to the other, as we'll see soon. What's the problem? Rabbi Eliezer should have said, I say you can always be doicha Shabbos to facilitate a mitzvah. And yet he doesn't say that he needs a pasuk or a Gzeira Shava. And Rashi continues, He b'chol machshirei mitzvah. If always and any time you need to lead and facilitate a mitzvah, if you're always allowed to be mechal Shabbos, ikar mitzvah neheges b'Shabbos amar machshirei k'moisa lama l'gzeira shava. If you always say that any mitzvah that needs to be done on Shabbos, you can push off Shabbos to any extent needed, well, then he wouldn't need a gzeira shava. He wouldn't need a proof from the Bible. He would just put it under his blanket statement that you can always be doicha es Shabbos. So from the fact that he doesn't say that, we understand that there are restrictions to his rule that machshirei mitzvah doicha es Shabbos. Where do we see that he actually needs a pasuk or a gzeira shava? The Tanya, there's a brisa where we quote Rabbi Elazar's opinion about the breads, the 2 breads on Shavuos. Rabbi Elazar says, "Nayin machshirei shtei halechem shadoichen es Shabbos." How do I know that any step that leads me to having these 2 breads on Shavuos on Shabbos, that you're allowed to be mechal Shabbos? And he says, "I'll bring you a gzeira shava." Nemra hava be'omer, in the context of the omer offering, which is brought on Pesach, it uses the word hava to bring. V'nemra hava b'shtei halechem, and the same language is deployed by the offering of the shtei halechem on Shavuos. So just as the Omer is pushes off Shabbos, so we compare and we borrow the facts, the halachic licenses of one mitzvah, and we convey it to Shtei Alechem because of Gzeira Shava, because of the common linguistic usage of the word Hava'ah. Rashi, what are the steps that are allowed? The Hainu Ketzira, Techina, Harkada Shala, all of the acts, the harvesting, the grinding, the sift, the winnowing, Doichen es Shabbos, they push off Shabbos on by Omer, Kedamir Menachis, Becharish, Bekatzer Tishbois, Acharish Shus, Af Katzer Shus, Yas, like Omer Shi Mitzvah. So we apply the halachic facts of Omer to Shtei Alechem. Based on this brisa, we see that Rabbi Eliezer is a little bit self-conscious, a little insecure about allowing a mitzvah or machshirei mitzvah, allowing acts that lead to the mitzvah to be done on Shabbos, absent biblical proof, showing us that he does not always say you can push aside Shabbos for any mitzvah that needs to be done on Shabbos. Folks, is that somewhat clear? Verstandig? All right. Again, I hit mute all at some point in the class, but I want to welcome comments, questions, challenges, disagreement. That's all what makes this Chabura special. All righty. The Gemara says, very interesting comment. Mufni. Let's read Rabbi Steinsaltz for a moment. With regards to this verbal analogy, the Gemara says it must be that the terms hava'ah are free, unencumbered. They aren't already taken for another halachic insight. The hava'ah word cannot be there to teach us any other halachic fact. The Eloi Mufni, because if they are not free, lifnot means empty, unencumbered, I think is probably a word that I would use. Dr. Stam, if you have a better word for me, help me out. But yeah, I think unencumbered is the right word. They're not tied down to any other limud. The Eloi Mufni, because if these words were not free, if they were used to teach another halacha, Ikal Mifrach, we would have a challenge. If there was any question about the freedom of the word hava for Gzeira Shava, we would have a challenge. And the challenge would be, Ma'ala Omer, Shekeni Matzah, Katzer, Kaitzer, Toimer B'Shtei Alechem, Shematzah, Katzer, Eni Kaitzer. There is something different about the ritual of Omer and the ritual of Shtei Alechem. The ritual of Omer is the first grain of the new year's yield that's being harvested on Pesach. Mark from Sa'irim, from barley, yeah? And then 50 days later, we take a bread made of wheat, we bring it as a Shtei Alechem. But the halachas are not entirely similar. The Omer is the very first. And it needs to be harvested lishma. It needs to be harvested specifically for the purpose of the carbon Omer. Let's read Rashi. Shekain matzah katsu. Shaloi l'shem Omer. If you found barley harvested, that's not harvested with the purpose of the Omer carbon, mitzvah liktsar lishma. You got to go back and cut more grain. Tichsiv uksartem ve'vesim. It says you shall cut it, reap it, and bring it. Hilkach kitzira gufei mitzvah. The harvesting of the Omer is not hechsher mitzvah. It doesn't facilitate a mitzvah. It is an integral part of the fulfillment of the mitzvah. Whereas it does not apply. This is not the case by Shtei Alechem. Omer b'Shtei Alechem shloi nemar b'hem kitzira. There is no instruction to harvest the Shtei Alechem. And therefore, if not for the two words hava being super, super unencumbered and utterly superfluous to the point where there needs to be a big chiddush, we would not be able to make this Gzeira Shava because there is something very not similar between these two different mitzvahs. Gemara says, Loi ifnuye mufni Rashi. In truth, it is super duper available. Let's see how Rabbi Steinsaltz translates it. Yeah, in truth, it is free. Dr. Stamler, you're probably wondering, and so is everyone else, how does the word loi equal yes? Indeed. Usually the word loi in Hebrew is no. It's a disagreement. So I don't think the word here is loi, but I want to look into Rabbi Steinsaltz because I'm certain he comments on this word, which we don't see all that often. Maybe it's like laya, which is like the opposite. But let's see how Rabbi Steinsaltz translates it. Bear with me a moment.
He puts the Nakudas on his law, not law.
I'm sorry.
Steinsaltz puts the Nakudas as law.
Yeah,
it's
but
not-
let's bear with me just a moment.
As opposed to law.
If he doesn't comment on this, I'm going to be shocked. He doesn't. Let's see ours. Hang on one second. All right. Actually, hold on. One more. In Yiddish, we would say take. This word loy is take. But I still want to. All right. It's look here. The Nekudas they use is lo'i. All right. It's taka available. Mechdi. It says you shall bring the first measure of this grain to the kohen. But it also says miyayim aviyachem. Let's open the psukim again. Here. Tanakh. Here we go. Oh, okay, give me some Hebrew, please. I will take them. Davra b'nei Yisrael v'matlem ki savoy la'aretz asher ani noisein lachem uktzartem es kitzira v'havesam es oimer reishus kisirchem alakai. Speak to the Jewish people. When you come into the land, you will harvest and bring that first measure to the kohen. And then just a few psukim later, it says, "Osvartem lochem," you'll count for yourself. Mimachar Shabbos, from the day after Yontif, after Shabbos. It's the famous debate about that. Miyoim haviachem es oimer hatznufa, from the day that you brought the oimer. Shabbos Shabbos. So we have the word of, we have the bringing brought twice. Two times the word bringing. So it's utterly superfluous, except that it has an important halachic function, and the halachic function is to teach us that you're allowed to cut the grain on Shabbos. This is the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, and it is truly a gzeira shava. It's a word that is super redundant and only present for our convenience to use to teach us this halacha that you're allowed to cut the grain on Shabbos for shtei halacha.
Rabbi,
Yes.
the word boy is not that unusual a word. It
Which
appears
word?
nowhere else in the Torah.
Which word?
Boy, the word that we used to make the
No.
Gzeira
We
Shava.
mean in the context of this mitzvah. It's
Yeah, because it's a common word almost.
No. It's a familiar word, but the Torah doesn't. The Torah, and this is the principle of Torah Shebal Peh and Chazal, and the principles of the Yud Gimel Midah Shatar and Direshus. The Torah does not bring extra redundant words. This is not a drasha. Therefore, every apparently redundant word is present to make a specific contribution, to make a specific halachic contribution, a specific practice that it is informed by those apparent redundancies. And in this context, that redundancy is here to teach us this halacha of being allowed to to bake the breads on Shabbos. It is only superfluous on one side. Let's read Rashi. Hava the oimer mufna. Hava the shtei alechem meni mufna the tzricha legufa. In the context of oimer, we have two hava. We have 2 times the word hava. In the context of shtei alechem, actually the word is not super free. We need to be told to bring it. And we yet use the Gzera Shava formula. And indeed, Rabbi Eliezer is of the opinion that a redundancy only on one side of the Gzera Shava is sufficient to give us a limud of a new halacha, Taviu Riboye. The one time Taviu is extra, and that is enough. I'm sorry, no. I'm sorry, no. Here. Mufna mitzad echad. It's only available on one end. It's not available on the other end. V'shamina le'ler Rabbi Elazar taught Ta'amar mufna mitzad echad l'meidin u'meishiyim. Let's read Rashi again. Gzera shava she'ena mufna v'shnei tzadeha. 2 words in 2 contexts that we connect, we apply with Gzera shava to teach us to apply halachic facts from one to the other. If it is not utterly redundant in both contexts, we can challenge it. We can use this as a limud. If there is no challenge to the commonality. But if there is some kind of challenge, that would be sufficient to break off the Gzera Shava and to destroy the Gzera Shava. And Rashi now quotes us the context where this conversation happens in Yevamis. But therefore, according to Rabbi Elazar, if it's only available on one side, it's not rock solid. And now we have a problem. How does Rabbi Elazar have this Gzera Shava? So the Gemara answers, Taviu Ribu Yehi. And so therefore, without going in length in the language, Rashi and the Gemara says, it could say, it could say that from your settlements is the Omer. The word Taviu is not entirely essential to get the point across. Therefore, the Gzera Shava is, in the language of the Mishnah, Mufna Mishnei Tzadim. They are 2 words that are essentially superfluous, and their introduction into this conversation is simply and purely to teach us a new halachic fact. The halachic fact is that you're allowed to cook the shtei alechem on Shabbos. What was the point of this whole discussion? The point of this whole discussion is to prove one simple thing. Rabbi Eliezer will not always allow you to desecrate Shabbos, to accomplish a mitzvah on Shabbos. And we see that from the fact that he necessitates Gzera Shava and doesn't apply this rule. Is this a different style of Gemara than we're used to? Yes, but I'll tell you, I have a feeling this is probably a lot of the form. This is going back to the Mishnah and to the core analytic style of the Gemara. And so, my dear friends, this concludes today's Gemara session. I want to thank you for holding on tight as we went through the twists and turns the Talmud presented us today in varying interesting conversations. Again, we had our conversation about the Bayis Mavai Chatzar. We had the opinion of Rav restricting use of a Mavai if the Chatzar has an Erev, which strains our comprehension, and yet we went through it. And then we had another discussion, which is the discussion of the Shtei Halechem and how we know that you can bake those breads on Shabbos. And from here we see that Rabbi Elazar limits the extent of when and how he will allow Malacha on Shabbos to facilitate a mitzvah. And tomorrow we will wind down our understanding of exactly Rabbi Eliezer's opinion of Machshirei mitzvah. My dear friends, that's the story. Thank you for joining us. I hope you'll join us tomorrow. And with Hashem's help, tomorrow we will have to burn a few less brain cells, but it will be enjoyable nonetheless. A big Yashar Koach to all. Again, we are honoring the neshama of Shmuel ben Yisrael Moshe Halevi, our dear Dr. Pasternak's father, Neshama Shavan Aliyah. Doctor, you and your whole family and all of us should only be blessed with good news, healthy news, happy news. I also like to say prayerful bakasha for healing for Malka Bas Simcha. I want to thank everyone who participated in the Chabad summer raffle. We're talking about folks that support the show so often. It's wonderful and grateful and generous to be a part. The drawing will be on Wednesday, and that's when we'll announce with Hashem's help the winners. The legal department this year wanted ample time in between for, I don't know, to vet all the entries and whatever. But with Hashem's help, the drawing will be on Wednesday. And as they say, may the best man or woman win. But the Yasher Koyach to everyone here. Thank you. Have a wonderful day, a blessed day, a healthy day, a happy day, and hoping to see everybody tomorrow. Gesundheit and Freilich Heit.
Have a great
Uh,
day.